Everything is personal right here. Everything is personal right here.
Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, welcome to another episode of Everything is Personal. And today our guest is David Amerland. Did I pronounce it correctly?
Absolutely. And Len, I'm so pleased to be here. Thank you for the opportunity. I'm looking forward to the conversation.
Likewise. So, David, you mentioned that fitness gave you a sense of control. I was wondering what was going on in your life when you first needed to sort of reclaim this sense of control.
That's an excellent question. Like most people, my life was a little bit chaotic and a little bit out of control. And that chaotic stage of it started around age 13 because my home circumstances, my parents were moving states in Australia. I kind of became unmoored. You change states, you change culture, you change schools, you have no friends, you have no anchor. You're always the new kid on the scene. And that, at that age, as you change also physically and psychologically, creates this perfect storm of chaotic environment within you. And usually what happens, the coping mechanisms that are in place for this kind of thing are perhaps doing some illegal substances, antisocial behavior, drinking perhaps, overeating, becoming, sort of antisocial generally. And for my luck, I came across a community center and they were doing karate. It was the Bruce Lee craze at the time. So I walked in and I spoke to the instructor and he agreed to let me join the next day. And I did. And what happened was that I'm not going to say I was unnatural. I wasn't. I had to work at it, but it absorbed me. And then the noise in my head started going down. And I love that feeling. And that's how it started for me. So essentially fitness, I was 13, I'm 60 now. And so 47 years of fitness, some of them at a very, very high level in terms of competitive martial arts, have been my sole coping mechanism. So that's what it is.
Do you feel that martial arts gave you not just a sense of purpose, but sort of this meditative state that you can actually go within, quiet the mind, and then be able to also express that physically? So it's both that mental and physical that we need to kind of get ourselves in the space instead of reactionary as we constantly are with all these stimuli that happen all the time?
Wouldn't it be amazing if that just happened just like that, right?
It doesn't. I thought that's what it does. I listen to you take Jeet Kune Do and that's it. That's all you need to do, right?
Well, it kind of happens and it kind of doesn't. I mean, as I grow older and more introspective and more emotionally stable, definitely, looking back, it's been that kind of bulwark in my life. It's allowed me to peel back the layers of who I am, understand myself a little bit better, and behave a little bit better, and plan my life a little bit better. But initially, all it is, you are, at least for me, you are replacing the stimulus of a chaotic environment, which makes you reactive, with the stimulus of a different chaotic environment, which is structured and organized, and where your reaction now can be learned and it can be controlled. So through that sheer lack of replacing one with the other, I realized that I can not control the outside world, but I can control myself. I just have to learn how to do it. And then I realized the other thing, that if I want to change physically, if I want to become faster, more coordinated, stronger, more durable, I had to change internally first. And that was the first lesson. And I remember my instructor, who was kind of rough and ready, told me, in his own words, I have to learn to get out of my own way. But at the time, 13-year-old, you think, what? And that stayed with me because my entire life, that's what I've actually been learning to do.
I want to go into a little bit about your origin story of growing up and everything. But before I do that, I'm just curious about this notion of having power. If you're you're an expert at martial arts, and we have people that are UFC fighters. I used to be a big boxing fan. So, when you're a professional boxer, your hands are a registered weapon. But there are still boxers out there that get into altercations and all that stuff. But you have such power that is beyond the average person. First of all, how do you control that as a teenager? Because I remember as a teenager, as a kid, I would get into fights all the time. But you have something that somebody else doesn't have. So how do you control that power? And does that end up getting you in trouble at all?
Well, the easy answer to that is that initially you do not. You are good at something, and then what do? You actually use that, right? So you get into fights. And what happened was that my instructor then kind of said, okay, let's spar together, and he beat me up. Which was a humbling experience. And he told me that the easiest way to find out who's better than you is to just go out there and fight for no reason. And that stayed with me. So, I was like almost 14 at the time. It's about a year later after I joined. So that made me realize that I don't have to constantly use what I have just because I have it, because it's a stupid thing to do. But that was part of the personal growth, yeah.
Okay, so where did you grow up?
Brisbane, Australia.
Okay. And were your parents together? Do you have siblings?
I have siblings, but my parents moved around a little bit, and I moved with them, obviously, because we all did.
Yeah.
They were working really hard. So my home environment was stable, but they were absent. So there's no parental supervision. And I was pretty much free to do what I wanted. And because I could work at the time, labor laws were a little bit different.
Yeah.
I also had money, which is a really bad combination.
Yeah, freedom, money as a kid. So, okay. And tell me about some of those experiences, like when you're a kid and you're by yourself. I was a latchkey kid. My parents weren't around either. They all worked. The only time I had to come back is when the lights went on. When it got dark out, the street lights went on. I had to come in for dinner, but I was by myself too. So I was up to no good too. So what were some of those experiences?
Well, you see, this is what happens. First of all, you grow up really quickly. So you're not 13, really. All my friends were like 15 or 16. And I had friends who were sort of adultish, about in their 20s, because the martial arts club was mixed, and I loved their company. So you tend to behave older than you are. And that includes everything. I found myself once having told my parents I was going to a training camp for the weekend. I found myself with some friends in another state, hunkering behind a wall because we're in the red light district and there's a gun war going on. Okay. And the thought in my mind at the time, right, because it was like 14 to going to 15, the thought in my mind was, please don't let me get hurt, because if it's a bullet wound and they take you to ER, then you have to explain who you are and your parents will be called. And I was in an entirely different state. So, I wasn't even considering that I might get killed. So it's kind of crazy. I was lucky a few times, let's put it this way.
It's funny. I had an altercation that I had my head split open, and I came home, and for 2 days, I was wrapping my head and hiding from my parents so they wouldn't see me, because I didn't want to get in trouble that I was doing the same kind of thing. But then it ended up I had to go to the hospital anyway and get stitches in my head. But I was trying to avoid it just for that reason, exactly what you're saying. Yeah. So we think differently as kids. When you're a kid and you're into martial arts, did you consider, like, I'm going to be a martial artist in my life, or what were your interests besides that? Were you like thinking, I'm going to go to school, I'm going to become an engineer, or did you have any of those thoughts at all?
Well, not in a structured way. You sort of go with the flow. You find something which you're good at, which you like doing, and you go all in. And that has a cascade of other effects. And in my particular case, because I was able to quieten the noise in my head down, I was also academically inclined at school. So I actually had a choice. And at the time, you could actually drop out legally at 16 and go and get a job, or you could stay and go into university. I chose to go and to stay and go into university. And that was also, looking back, although I didn't articulate it to myself as much at the time, it was again having that sense of control. You realize that the things you know make you stronger mentally. They give you more opportunities. So as you train your body to be more than other people, you can train your mind to be better. And that again gives you a sense of control. And this is vital. As humans, and we actually crave that. If we have a sense of control of our life, even if it's an illusion, we have less anxiety, we have less stress, we end up making better decisions because we have more inner resources to allocate to those decisions. We become more thoughtful because we have the headspace to do that. And we also have, in the long term, better health outcomes because less stress, less anxiety, greater sense of control. We don't feel the toxicity rising inside us that a sense of victimhood activates. And these are things we know now, but at the time it's kind of instinctive for me. So that's how it sort of happened. There was no grand plan, but it did work out.
So how do you talked about strength and there's, physical strength and mental strength. I'm wondering, since that definition has evolved for you over time, what can people do to get that sense of control in their life?
Looking back, if I was to advise my younger self, I'd say, think clearly about who you really are and think clearly about what you want to do. Knowing that this would change over time, and that's okay. But at the time, it becomes the anchor point of your identity. So to give you a sort of a frame, I didn't know how to behave because, if you have absent parents, you don't have that guiding sort of mechanism in front of you to copy. And if you have older friends, they're not necessarily the best guides. And what saved me most times, what helped me develop a moral framework that actually works, was there was a big comics reader. And you read, superheroes, right? And they don't fit in. And so you sort of identify with that. Yeah. And they also have a lot of power, and you identify with that. And then they face these gray moral dilemmas where they could do nothing or they could do the wrong thing and it wouldn't matter. And they choose to do the right thing. And it kind of sort of appeals to you. And that's how I learned to operate.
I'm going to try to paraphrase this because I read somewhere that you talked about motivation. I think it's discomfort that exceeds our tolerance. They have that sort of. So can you unpack that a little bit through the lens of either neuroscience or what does that actually mean?
Neurochemically, we can't feel something out of nothing, right? So if you have a feeling as ethereal as the motivation to do something, as insubstantial as that, it has to have a neurochemical basis in our neurobiology. In terms of neuroscience, that is the accumulation of specific neurotransmitters, which reach a certain threshold. And when a threshold is reached in a particular context, we feel a certain level of discomfort. And the only way to relieve the discomfort is to actually do something. So if you're really, really thirsty and put a glass of water in front of you and you wait for hours and hours, at some point, your thirst exceeds your ability to maintain your discipline and you're going to reach for the glass of water. And the moment you do, chemically, neurochemically inside your body, you're going to stabilize. Your anxiety will drop, your stress will drop, the sense of discomfort you have will go away. It's the same thing with any kind of decision. If you're making a decision and you're not sure it's the right one, if you visualize where it's going and it feels that it's kind of less messy inside you, less chaotic, that's a good indication that you're going in the right direction.
Interesting. Yeah, because I'm personally in the middle. I run a company. I'm the CEO, and there's so many times you're making decisions, and what I used to do is try not to make the wrong decision. Like, how do I ensure? And you can't. How do you know that you're going to make the right or wrong decision? So I think it's that gut feel, that trust in yourself to say, regardless of the outcome, this feels right. And even if it's a mistake down the road, it's a lesson learned. And I think a lot of people are too afraid to make that mistake, so they never start, but they wait until things get really bad before they act. So
Yes.
what have you learned, or what can you let people know about taking action early instead of reacting to all the stimuli that comes in? Don't you want to get ahead of things? And I'm going to preface this with saying, like, I do genetic testing. My company is a genetic testing company. So I always thought about this. Well, if you know that you have these potholes in your own road, why would you not take advantage of that to address lifestyle changes so you don't step in those things? So to address them before they actually turn on. And it's a very difficult concept for human beings to get in some way. So I want to get your thoughts on that.
Yeah, okay. I love what you said. You're absolutely right. Usually when we make a decision, or when you have to make a decision, and we're reluctant to do so, the pass we give ourselves is that we wait for things to be perfect so we can make the best decision possible. And perfect never happens. It's always going to be chaotic. It's always going to be messy. And then we also say to ourselves that we'll wait until we have to make it later on. And then the point where we have to make it, we have no choice, that's not a decision, that's a reaction. And so many of us get caught up in that situation. Then that decision which we would have to make or not is taken out of our own hands, and we're not in control of our lives. So I always say, if you want to avoid these things happening, you have to decide what's the direction you're heading towards, and then check to see if every decision that you make, it doesn't matter how difficult it is, how big it is, how small it is, does it align? Does it align with the general direction you're going to? Does it align with your sense of who you are and what you're trying to achieve? Ultimately, you're looking for that. Does it make me feel a little bit better? You say, if I don't make this decision, am I going to feel better or worse? And that small litmus test is a very good guide that you're going in the right direction. Even if that decision ultimately turns out to be the wrong one, at the time that you made it is actually the better one to make.
You talk, I think, in your book about emotional energy. So as a driver for sustainable action. So if I can kind of give somebody a real life example of that means, because if you're driving action and you have an emotional anchor that makes you feel good, it makes you want to continue to do that action. What if it doesn't make you feel good? Like, some people working out, and I don't want to get into like training, all that stuff. They say, you know what, it's too hard. Or I took somebody on a hike with me. Oh, it's hot and there's bugs. It's too hard. So their emotional energy and anchor to this is negative, but there's so much benefit from doing that. So how do you control this emotional energy for this sustainable action?
This is what happens to each of us all the time. There's a calculus in our head which is designed to help us survive. And that calculus essentially, without us articulating it or being very conscious of it, calculates the amount of effort required to do something against the value of the expected outcome. So if I were to tell you, for instance, if you and I were alone on a desert island and we're starving, there's no amount of effort we wouldn't put into catching our food. We wouldn't think it's too hard. We wouldn't think it's too difficult. We wouldn't think we don't have the necessary skills or the necessary tools. We do everything possible to catch that food because we need it. And why would we do that? Because the value we place now, emotionally and materially, on the expected outcome is quite high. And that deprecates the amount of effort we'll have to put in. The inventiveness we'll have to sort of put into creating tools we don't have. The strategy we'll have to put in place. The learning curve of surviving in a hostile place. We'll do all of that. Your friend on the hike liked the idea. He was at an abstract level, or she was at an abstract level, okay with it, but the experience of it physically was hard. And then they said, this is too hard. But if that person emotionally was tied into the outcome of the health benefits they get from that hike, as well as the beauty of being in nature, the social aspect of being with people, all those things, then the hike itself, doesn't matter how hard it is, you see it as an adventure. Yeah. And your brain deprecates the effort that went into it, deprecates the hardship, the difficulty, because you get materially for yourself a fresh value which you have recalculated out of that. And all that's changed because the hike is just as hard as it was before, is that emotional connection.
Yeah,
and that's what the emotional energy
it's reframing the way that you see this as a struggle, but focusing on the benefit of the outcome that you receive, kind of thing, which is very difficult for people to do because they don't see it this way, which is a segue that I want to talk to you about, this whole longevity space. So people talk about living longer all the time, and I really find it fascinating because my aunt passed away not that long ago. She was 102 years old. Where I would say for the last 10 to 15 years, it wasn't really even living. Like, it's 24-hour care, you're wearing a diaper, like you're just surviving and existing. So people have this notion of living longer, but do you really want to live longer, or do you want to live a healthier life for as long as you want? So can you talk a little bit about this whole notion of living longer versus, I guess, lifespan versus health span?
Yeah, absolutely. And it's what you said. Essentially, if we're to live longer and have X number of years added to our life because of some lifestyle choices, improved housing, improved medical attention, all those things, then at the same time, we want to increase the length of time in which we're in control of our body, in control of our senses, can do what we want with our life, and we're still actually enjoying being alive. And that's the difference between health span and lifespan, because like your aunt's unfortunate experience, if we have a significant part of our life where we're just barely surviving, for sure we're alive, but we're no longer actually living. And what we define by living is that ability to be out and about in the world, to do the things we enjoy, to get enjoyment from the things we do. And speaking of these things, one of the things which are very closely aligned to health span these days is the meaning we ascribe to the things we do. People talk about the meaning of life, and that's really deep, really abstract, and nobody has truly worked it out. But there's definitely meaning in life. And if you do a lot of meaningful things, and those things cumulatively add up to something, that's a meaningful life. And that's something beautiful to experience.
How does one find that meaning? Because I know I talk to a lot of people, even guests on the show, and a lot of people talk about this whole finding what is meaningful to them. They're working their 9-to-5 job, and they're not, it doesn't feel like. I'll just use myself as an example. So I used to be a commercial real estate broker for years, and I thought I loved what I did. I loved the transaction of it because it gave me dopamine, and I have ADD. So I'm like, shit, give me more of that dopamine. But as soon as that transaction was done, I was back to the same space, and I sat down and I sort of meditated on this. What am I really contributing? What is my contribution? Okay, well, I'm helping some people get a commercial property. Maybe I'm helping them for their business. I dealt with a lot of investors. I'm helping them make more money. It doesn't fulfill my soul. Like, I felt empty by doing that. So finding purpose in that meaning was, I don't even know. I may be still looking for it all the time because it's a search, even though what I do now gives me that feedback, but you're also not working with customers all the time. You're not getting that feedback because in an executive role, you're wearing many different hats. So it takes me some time to say, okay, well, I'm doing this for a purpose. There is a reason why I'm doing this. So I have to reconnect with that. how do you get to that point where you find what is your purpose or meaning, as you said, in the work, in the contribution that you're making?
There are several ways we can apply here, but some are easy and some are hard. The easier ones is to go with our feelings, like you did. You did something, it was enjoyable, and like myself, it mirrors kind of my own trajectory. I was in corporate for a while at very high level, absolutely loved it. I was really good at it. But ultimately, it kind of left me a little bit empty because I thought I can keep on doing this for the next 20, 25 years, and I will not have moved the needle more than just a tiny inch. And that seemed like ridiculous. So if the feeling is there that what you're doing is not really doing a lot for you, then it's time to actually explore different things, knowing that the transition is going to be hard because you're going to lose part of your identity, you're going to lose part of the things which you're good at, and you're going to have to learn to do new things. So that's one way of doing it. Another way of doing it is actually doing the internal work we need. Journaling, for instance. Therapy, if journaling is too hard, and some people do find it hard and find therapy easier. Talking to a confidant, having a really good friend who actually looks out for you. Any of those things. They are essentially mechanisms which create a mirror, which create a mirror, and that mirror then reflects back at us the values that we have, the anxieties we hold, the insecurities we harbor, and that allows us to get a clear idea of who we are and what's important to us. And the moment we realize what's important to us, well, there you go. We begin to have priorities. And priorities have meaning because we prioritize something because it's more meaningful to us than something else. And if something is more meaningful, then there's a purpose behind it. So just by those simple acts, we begin to create a roadmap for our life that actually has a better direction to just reacting to circumstances because we have no choice.
You also talk about epigenetics in your book and where you can take some action. Can you kind of explain what that means and why is it important to know your epigenetics and what can you do about it? Because people get trapped in this, it's in my DNA kind of thing. There's nothing I can do.
Absolutely. And I'm glad you brought it up. People do say that. They say, good genetics. He's fit. He's got better genetics than me. Well, possibly. That is possibly true. But he hasn't just happened to have good genetics which worked for that person. He's worked on what he's got. Epigenetics essentially is and we're learning more and more about how the mechanism works, but it's a gene expression that allows specific parts of the DNA to be activated or deactivated. So let's say, for instance, that you happen to be unlucky and you have a predisposition towards a particular type of cancer because it runs in your family, because your genes are there and you have it. And you exercise, you eat right, you sleep right, in the right environment, and you never, ever, ever get cancer. And all you've done in that is you took the genetic lottery, which was not really in your favor, and you stacked it so that the odds now are in your favor as opposed to being against you. And that's the simplest way to understand epigenetics.
Yeah, it's a great explanation because I always tell people, you have some genes that are in the on position when you're born, your hair color, your eye color, your skin color, all that stuff. A lot of your other genetic predispositions, you have the lifestyle choice to make. But if you're driving blind through life, you don't know what you're predisposed to. You don't know what you need to turn on and off. So you need to actually look at both and then take action, as you were mentioning. How does stress impact epigenetic expression? Okay. If it does at all?
It does. It absolutely does. Now, stress impacts us through a cascade of negative health events. First of all, it raises the cortisol level in our bloodstream. And the moment cortisol, which is a stress hormone, goes past a certain threshold, it has all sorts of implications. Inflammation goes up in the body, for sure, but at the same time, it affects the energy pathways of the body, how the body draws energy from carbohydrates stored in the bloodstream, glucose, blood glucose, and also how it breaks down fats. And then that mechanism is impaired. We may end up, for example, being unable to access fat reserves, even though we have them. And the body may draw glucose from the bloodstream and actually put it into fat reserves, which means that, in plain English, that we may have changed nothing in our diet, our stress levels have gone up, and we end up putting weight on and feeling worse than ever due to inflammation, due to insufficient glucose reserves in our bloodstream. And all we've done is have failed to adequately handle our stress, the stress that we experience. It has a cascade of other events in the brain. The moment the body goes through a kind of stress response, the brain perceives that as a threat because it doesn't understand that it's something which is abstract and we can deal with it through thought. So it gets ready to fight or flight. It goes into survival mode. In order to do that, it puts resources into muscles and heartbeat and blood pressure, so kind can get elevated. But most importantly, it shuts down the higher analytical parts of the brain, which we need for clear thinking, because they are energetically expensive. So if I give you a complex problem to solve, and your life depends on it, as in not literally, but metaphorically, and you get really, really stressed, you may be unable to actually navigate it and see a solution through it simply because you got stressed. And then that stress, as it becomes chronic, it leads to chronic inflammation, which leads to worse gut microbiome sort of operation. It affects our hormonal profile. The brain-gut axis gets compromised. The entire structure begins to go wrong. And we're a complex system. A complex system is essentially a number of systems nested into each other. They depend on the good operation of other systems in order to function correctly. So we can't say, oh, our body's malfunctioning, but our brain is bright, or the other way around. It just doesn't happen. All these things have this delicate balance in terms of how they operate with each other.
You have a lot of tools and suggestions in your book, Built to Last, on de-stressing. Is there anything you can share that somebody can do to sort of de-stress themselves quickly if they're actually starting to feel that fight or flight response?
Definitely, absolutely. And it's important to be self-aware, obviously, because we're not always aware of our own stress levels. But elevated heartbeat, sweating, perhaps tight chest pain, which comes from constricted diaphragmatic movement, all those things are dead giveaways. The moment we feel ourselves getting stressed, or the moment we feel ourselves getting overwhelmed because our brain can't think clearly anymore, we can engage a response which is common to every mammal on the planet, which is sighing, essentially a deep breathing response. And if we breathe deeply, what happens? We engage the parasympathetic nervous system of the body. And the main function of that is to bring the body back down to baseline levels of operation so it can actually decompress. So if we take a really, really deep breath and hold it for a second, and we have filled up our lungs completely, and then without exhaling, we take out just a tiny little bit more, like a double sigh, and hold it for a number of 2-3 seconds more. And then we exhale softly, we'll immediately feel a difference because everything just drops down to baseline. So that's an immediate relief. This is a kind of breathing practiced by public speakers and elite combatants, because they're also in highly stressful situations, and they learn to do this automatically.
Yeah, it's such an amazing technique, because you're absolutely right. Before I go on stage, I take a deep breath, suck in more, hold it, release, and it just, you're calm going out on stage. You're absolutely right. That is the best thing you can do. You know what? You just gave me an idea. I'm going to start doing that with every one of my guests when they come onto the show. Let's take a deep breath so we can align, and then we'll get going. We should have done that, because I had a little bit of stress before we got on this show. So, but I feel much better now. you help.
That's an excellent idea. I'm so glad. And that's an excellent idea, actually. It's really, really good.
I wanted to talk to you about this notion of external goals versus internal capabilities. There is you're chasing one without the other. So maybe I can give an example. You can probably give it better examples. But if you have if you have if you have big goals, like maybe you want to be a professional athlete, but do you actually have the capabilities? And how do you know? Like some people say you can do anything. Like we tell our kids all the time, you can be anything you want to be, but are you setting them up for success? Or are you setting them up for failure because maybe they don't have the internal capabilities to be whatever they want to be? So maybe you can kind of frame that a little bit.
Okay. I mean, and obviously that's a well-intended approach, right? You want your kids to be confident. You want them to feel that they can do things. You want them to feel that you provide a safe space for them to fail in. So you want them to do all those things. But when it comes to us personally, and we say, okay, we need to set a goal, and that goal can be pretty far-reaching, and then we need to find a pathway to that. And it's a confidence thing. But confidence comes from doing as opposed to thinking. So we need to break things down into steps, which are doable steps, and create the process and the stages that will take us to where we want to in the reasonable frame of time that we have allowed for that to happen. And if we take that approach, which is a very structured approach, very logical, this is what happens. We find that our own sense of confidence grows. There's a certain amount of learning which inevitably happens in that space, both inside and outside. Inside about who we are, and outside in skill sets which we need to acquire or refine in order to get where we want to. And if the goal is wrong for us, maybe it's beyond us, maybe it's not really what we want, halfway through we'll actually realize and we'll be able to realign. And the magic of this approach is that because we've already done the work, the realignment, the repositioning doesn't feel like failure. It feels like a kind of reframing of the goal and a change in direction towards something which is more desirable for us. And that's perfectly fine. And that's so much better to implement and approach than saying, oh, this is where I am, this is where I want to be, and I really want to be there. And these are all the things I haven't got. I haven't got this, I haven't got that, I haven't got that. It seems impossible to me. And surely everybody else who's got there, they must have had those things. And this is nonsense, because even the people who had those things, they had other problems to overcome. It's never easy for anybody to get anywhere. So that methodical approach essentially becomes a roadmap for ourselves inside as well as outside, and it helps us become better.
You talk about the things you need to do in order to increase health span, like your mindset, the things that you put in your body, the food, the nutrients, but physical activity, working out, which you're a big proponent of. How do you motivate somebody to go to the gym? Because I said this before in a couple of different episodes. You go to the gym in January, people made their New Year's resolution, the parking lot's packed. By the time you get to May now, it's much less than it was. But now the summer's coming up here in the US, and people are starting to get to the gym because hurry up, let's get me my beach body, and then they go back again. It's like, so you have a very short motivation to get you there. But how do you get the people to anchor in this motivation? Because Healthspan calls for those things. It's where you put in your body, where you put in your mind, and how you work on your body. So what can you do to motivate somebody?
Okay. First of all, people show up, right? They show up in January and they show up in May to prepare for June. No matter how short-sighted it is, they are motivated to do it. So it's not a question of motivation. They're there. They want to do the work. They want to see the results. So in order for us to keep them coming back in a more regular intervals, in order for us to help them work out more consistently so they see better results, so they don't have this kind of up and down in their lives, it's a question of education, perhaps, and also a realignment of emotional values. Sure, they want to see the beach body for sure, but don't they also want to feel good all year round? And it doesn't have to be the ripped look they're going to get in the summer, but all year round they want to feel strong and capable and healthy, able to deal with situations, able to let stress bounce off them. If we reframe that, then the emotional value in that context of continuing to work out at a different intensity with different goals, doing something different, but all that intended to make us physically better, emotionally more stable, psychologically stronger. Everybody wants that. It's just that they don't know how to get it. So usually as professionals, we are there to help them make that connection, show them what they can do, which will not be energetically so high that they can't do it. You can tell somebody, sure, I'll make you super fit in a year. Show up in my gym every day. I'll train you for 3 hours every single day. Well, they can't do it. They haven't got 3 hours. And even if they did for a while, they're too exhausted to deal with their life. So now they can't put their life on hold for this because, they want life, which they don't have a choice. They have to have it plus this. So we need to basically show them that they can do small things, which are not energetically expensive, which then help them incrementally get where they want to get to with less effort. So they don't have to make a big push in May and a big push in January and then peter out by mid-March.
Yeah, it makes total sense. I want to talk to you about you, and if there's anything that you still struggle with, maybe that people are surprised to learn about you, because we come out as these experts, and people are like, oh, and you said this earlier in the show, you have a mask that you wear also, and people see you and put you in a pedestal. You wrote a book and you're fit and but we're human. We all have our own struggles. So I want people to understand that you were talking about comic books, heroes. Even heroes have their own struggles and all these other things. So I wanted to kind of get this human part of yourself so you may be able to share anything you're struggling with.
Definitely. And I struggle with a lot of things all the time. Physically, I'm 60 now. I'm still training every day. And there are days when I'm tired, when I can't go as hard. And I don't know, is that because I'm really tired, really exhausted, or is it because I'm getting older and my body's weakening? And I don't know. There's a voice in my head that's constantly questioning this thing. I turn up in podcasts like this and I speak with confidence about all these things. And there's so many things I don't know, on top of a few things that I actually do know. And I'm totally aware of my own lack of knowledge in so many different areas. And it terrifies me sometimes. There are situations, and especially before the pandemic, I used to travel a lot. And you get used to this kind of approach where you get to the airport, they have a limousine waiting for you, they take you to your hotel. It's a 5-star hotel, they open the doors for you, and depending where you are, they call you sir. And there's a danger that it really gets to you. And you sort of think that you're special, and we're not. I'm aware that I'm just a guy doing a job, and I'm very lucky doing something I love. And it's as far as it goes. And the people around me, they perhaps better than me in so many different ways, they just can't see it. So I keep those things in my head because I'm always worried that I will lose touch with reality, buy into my own hype. These are my own insecurities, and I always struggle with them.
Yeah, I think vulnerability is strength. And I think that we go through life trying to, pound our chest and have the world see us in a certain way, where we sometimes, have these insecurities, this self-talk. But if we realize that everybody has that self-talk, it's not just, it's from Richard Branson to Elon Musk. It doesn't make Elon Musk. Everybody has that. Then they're just human as us. They just happen to, have something we don't at the moment. Doesn't mean that we can't get it also. But I think vulnerability is really important. And people, I had this conversation with a CEO who was giving me advice that I need to be tougher. I need to be tough with my employees and tell them, and I'm like, it's not my nature. That's not who I am. So I'm going to be a false person of myself communicating in a way that I normally don't communicate. And I don't believe in a lot of sticks. I'm a big carrot person. I believe in incentivizing people and shedding positive light. So if it works for you, wonderful. You do that. But it doesn't work for me. I can't be a version of you. I have to be the best version of myself. So how do you, like, when you're speaking to people, how do you get people to understand that this whole comparison, I want to be like you at 60, I want to have, big biceps and all this stuff, but I'm 5'3" and, I don't have that kind. How do you get people to realize that they just need to embrace to be the best version of themselves?
It's a great question. Throughout my life, I have had this refrain in my head, which I got from the X-Men comic book. And it said, we just ask for a person's worth and not the accident of their condition. And it just stayed with me forever in all these different contexts. When people look up to somebody, they've got to remember that a person is good within a particular context, and that's as far as it goes. They can be completely deficient in everything else. So just being good at something doesn't make them a better person. Just like being bad at something doesn't make them a bad person. I think people are amazing. They have the capacity to surprise us all the time. In my career, I've always been an outsider because I moved around countries, I moved around companies, I moved around jobs. So I've always been an outsider. And I've been helped in my career by people I never expected to help me, and they never expected anything back. And that has always become the hallmark for me of humanity. I try to do the same thing with people I meet. So when it comes to dealing with situations where you think, who should I be? How should I behave? Do what feels right. Do what feels will do the least amount of harm, and do what feels will actually fit in with what you want to do, how you see yourself acting in that situation. And I think if you keep those rules in mind, it doesn't matter who you are, it doesn't matter the context of your situation, you will very rarely, if ever, go wrong.
Yeah, I think that's really, really good advice. So I want to kind of shift focus for the last part of this, where I ask questions of my guests, same questions, or music-related questions.
Okay.
So let's see how we do with these. So do you remember, and if so, what was the very first concert that you attended?
I don't go to concerts because I have this thing about crowds. I don't feel in control. So I never do. So
You've never been to a concert?
No, I literally in a crowd, I don't feel safe. And I know it's in my head. I know it's this need for me to have a sense of control of my surroundings. And I understand that completely. But because it doesn't help me enjoy the music, I have never been to a concert.
Okay. So we'll skip the second question because that was going to be the last concert that you attended. All right. So we'll get to the meat of it. For the next year, you could only listen to 5 albums. And by the way, you don't have to remember the name of the album. It can be, I don't know, I have Amy Winehouse behind me. So it can be whatever the artist is. What would be those 5 albums or artists you would listen to in next year?
I like Enya. I like Scorpions. Anything Taylor Swift. I'm trying to remember the name of the group. No, it's come on, something Dragons.
Imagine Dragons.
Imagine Dragons. Thank you. Imagine Dragons. Anything by them, and I love Sheena Easton. For Your Eyes Only in particular. I could listen to that forever.
Great. All right. So final question. Please describe what your room looked like growing up.
Oh wow. Okay. It was full of books, relatively neat, chaotic closet.
Anything on the walls, any art, any posters, anything?
No, I didn't have any of those. No. But I had a full, it was fairly large. The house I grew up in was large. So I had my own bedroom.
Got it.
My brother shared, but I didn't. So I had a large room, full body mirror. I used to train in front of it at the end of the day.
David, where can people find out more about you? Where can they engage with you? Where can they get a copy of your book? Anything else that you want to share?
Yeah, you can find me at davidamerland.com. I put a lot of stuff out there, studies I come across that really excite me. I sort of boil them down to a couple of sentences so you can get a gist of them. And I give you a link if you want to sort of go and see them. I blog about some of those things. You can find my books on Amazon or anywhere you go, any retailer. If you buy them from bookshop.org, then you can get them from your community bookshop and support them. And I'm all for that. And obviously you can order them from any bookshop.
Wonderful. And for my audience, I want to thank you again. Don't forget to subscribe, follow, share, continue the comments, continue the feedback. Love the stars. Please, 5 stars are wonderful, but if not, bring whatever you think that I need to improve on. I love that. And thank you for buying my book, Making Cannabis Personal, on Amazon. David, I really want to thank you. I think it's amazing work. People really need to understand that they have the power within themselves to make lasting changes so they can have that health span versus lifespan. I think you do a wonderful job in your book describing it. So thank you so much for being on. Really appreciate it.
Thank you very much for having me. Absolutely loved this.
Thanks.
Hey, everyone. So does anybody know what greening out means? I've been the recipient of so many calls over the years of people greening out. That means they took too much THC and had an adverse reaction. So I always recommend other things, but nothing really concrete. Now I can. There's a solution. It is called Antidose. Antidose.com is quick. It's rapid. It works immediately, safe, and effective. So I love my props. If you are toasty or you are burnt, that's the difference. Now, I also love the 1 gummy, 2 gummy, 3 gummy floor. So just be aware, very narrow therapeutic window. You know exactly what you can take now if you've taken too much. Once again, it's Antidose at antidose.com. Get yours today. Hey everyone, thank you for watching and listening. And don't forget to hit the subscribe button, share this episode, and hit that bell. Like, comment. I so appreciate that. And check me out on social under Len May or Len May DNA. Find out more on LinkedIn or lenmaycoaching.com. And remember, everything is personal.